today's video, I'm going to show you why I used 3 programs to edit this image and give it its final look. Let's jump right in and get started. Often when I'm out shooting in the garden, I, of course, take tons of images, especially when you're chasing a butterfly on a zinnia. So I loved many of the images that I took, and I've edited some of them, but this one really stood out. I liked the position of the butterfly. I liked that you could still see the movement of it on the flower. I liked the flower coming out from this side of the image. I thought it was very balanced, and I was able to capture most of the detail and especially the focus on the face of the butterfly. So out of all the images I took, this is one of my favorites. But there are a couple tweaks that I'd like to make it a stunning image, and one that I may want to use for either print or for a competition or a gallery showing. So what I want to do now is take the image to the next level so that I have it completely finished. So I'm going to walk you through a couple changes that I would make to this image to have it ready for production. So first, I'm here in Lightroom, and I have just some basic edits that I've made. I added just a little bit of clarity, but it's not making a lot of changes. So I'm just going to leave it. My histogram was really nice. It was spread all the way across, and I don't really see anything related to exposure that I need to adjust. I did bump the whites just a little bit. It's really not very noticeable, but I just wanted to bump those just a tiny bit. And then I did look at my white balance, and I wanted to give it just a little bit warmth. So I did increase the temperature to the yellow side for warmth just a tiny bit. So really the image is fine as it is, but again, I want to make those final tweaks. So the first thing I'm going to do is right click, and I'm going to edit in, and I'm going to go to Topaz Studio 2. Now, if you've watched any of my prior videos, you'll know that I do sometimes use Topaz Studio 2. It is a really fun, easy to use creative editing program. It integrates with Lightroom. And so once I click Edit in Topaz, it is going to make a digital copy of my image, and it's going to open that second image here in Topaz. So I love that part of the program. I still have my original image back in Lightroom. So when you open Topaz, you're going to have the options to add a filter or add a look. And the first thing I like to do is go to Add Filter, and I'm going to use their AI Clear. This is their AI technology that just kind of cleans up the image. It gets rid of any noise. It adds a little bit of detail and just kind of a overall cleanup kind of pop to the image. So if you look at before and after, you can see a little brightness on these yellow flowers. I don't see anything much in the butterfly. There's a little bit of opening the shadows over here. And that's really all I see that it did to the image, maybe a little brightening over here. So it's very subtle, and I find it works great in almost any image. All right, so we've got that. My remove noise, I'm going to go ahead and it's on auto, so I think it's fine. I don't see a lot of noise in this image, and I don't see a lot of spots or things like that I need to correct. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is go to Add Look. And this is where I want to come down, and I'm going to add the look Fur and Feathers. And this is what I like to use, but I'm going to use it at a very low amount. So you'll see when it comes on, it is very heavy at bringing out details. I'm going to bring it really down low. So I want to just bring it a little bit. What I'm wanting to do is bring out a little bit of the texture in the flower and even on the butterfly. So you can hold the hand over your screen and click to see kind of the before and the after. So what it's done, it's made the antennas pop a little bit, and it has made, what I'm going to do is enlarge, and I want to make sure that it's not, I don't want it to be over processed. So you can see we're getting a little bit of halo there. So I'm going to go ahead and apply. But now what I'm going to do is grab the mask, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to invert the mask. So that takes it off. So now the mask is gone. I'm going to grab the brush and take it to white, and I'm going to apply it where I want it, which was really just on this flower. to bring out a little detail, maybe on the legs and the body of the butterfly. I don't think I want very much of it on the antennas because it was giving that halo effect, and I don't want that. And let's see if I bring a little bit on this. Yeah, it's bringing out those details just a little bit in the butterfly. And so I do like that. Just don't want it on those antennas. So let me reduce the image and maybe add a little bit right in there. And then if you want to make sure you don't have any in a particular area, I can come around with the brush. I flipped the brush to black, and I can just make sure that's still really soft along those edges. So I'm just going to come around the edge here and just make sure that stays really soft. Okay, so we've got that done. Now, if we look at, I'm going to close the mask. And if I look at before and after, you should be able to see just a little bit of changes here on the flower and a little bit on the body. So that's all I'm going to do here in Topaz. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click Accept, and it's going to take my image back to Lightroom. So we can come back over to Lightroom, and it's processing. It's going to be our 1 of 2. So now we have the image from Topaz, and then we also have our before image. So we can look at those. We've got our Topaz and we've got our other image. So let me click on those, and this is the Topaz image. And then all right, so if we put these side by side, I wanted you to be able to see the difference. You can see the difference in the petal here. This is the before, and let me zoom in, and you can see the after. So just bringing out those lines a little bit of detail here on the butterfly wings. So that's a little bit what adding that Topaz feature did. So very, very subtle. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is let's go back to our regular view, and this is our number 2 image. We can see that down here. It's 1 of 2. So this is the one that's been edited now in Topaz. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit it in Photoshop. So here's where I'm going to make my final adjustments. Now I use the 2 different programs, actually 3 programs for this image, because I like selectively what they can do. While one program could probably make all of these changes, I like to use the strengths of each program individually. So I feel that there are strengths in Topaz, which is some of those creative elements, and then there's strengths here in Photoshop. So the first thing I'm going to do is duplicate my background layer. You can do Command J for that, or you can right click and you can duplicate layer. So that gives us a nice, clean, ready to go layer to work with. So the first thing I want to address in this image is this blob right here. And there's a couple ways to do that. I'm going to show you one of my favorite tools. So what I'm going to do first is go to Select, and I'm going to select Subject and see what Photoshop does. Okay, it did the butterfly. It did not do this leaf, but I'm going to come over, and over here on the left, I'm going to grab the Quick Selection tool. I've got it on plus, and I'm going to brush over, and I'm going to see if I can include this leaf. And I'm going to come down around right there. Let me grab the minus. I'm not wanting this to be exact. Okay, what I'm trying to do is protect this area of the image. So now that I have this selected, I'm going to go to Select, and I'm going to do Inverse. All right, so now we've inverted it. And what this means is that this area is protected, and I'm now going to go in and use my clone tool to erase this little blob. Now, I like making this selection because it allows me to get a little bit closer and not impact this leaf edge. So what I'm going to do with the clone tool is click the Option key in an area nearby, And then I'm just going to start cloning that white blob out. And you can see now I can keep my brush really soft and I'm not impacting the leaf at all. And it looks really nice and natural. So when you're done, you can click Command D and it's all clear. So now we can see before and after. So that's making a really nice difference in our image. Now what I'm going to do now is go ahead and duplicate this layer, Command J. Now if you like to label your layers, you can do that really quick. So I could call this white clone out. And then now I am going to just do some additional clone work. And I'm going to label this layer. So I've still got my clone tool on. I'm going to keep it really large. And what I want to do is you can just see this light just had a little streaks, but I've got nice bokeh over here. I'm going to make that my selection and I'm just going to come around and soften this up just a little bit. Click the Option key. And sometimes you have to make your brush a little bit smaller. Click the Option. And yeah, I'm just going to come around and just enhance that, soften it just a little bit to kind of match the rest of the area. And then once I'm finished with that, what I'm going to do is I can actually reduce the opacity. So I can come down and just maybe take that to maybe about 80–90%. And if we look at the before, you can see that kind of blob down there kind of caught your eye. And now it's just really smooth, nice light. Now I also kind of give myself a chance to look at it again. And I'm going to take this setting right here and I'm going to come over right here. There were these two dots together. And so I'm just going to blob over that and soften it. All right, so again, before and the after. And you can just continue to look and just make some small tweaks where the light is if you want. All right, so the last thing that I wanted to do with this image is I really wish I had more space at the end of the top of the image where the line is here. I'd really like to have a little bit more breathing room for the butterfly. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a stamped layer. So a stamped layer is going to be everything. It's not flattening the image. It's giving you a layer that's combining all your current work. So I'm going to do Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E, and that's going to create a new stamped layer. And I'm going to go ahead and label this one Extend Canvas. All right, so I'm going to go over to the crop tool. I'm going to make sure at the top of your screen you have Content Aware selected. And now I'm just going to increase this just a little bit to give it a little breathing space. Now Photoshop typically does a really nice job of figuring out the pixels and correcting it with the Content Aware feature. So I'm going to click check and we'll see what it does. Kind of hold your breath and hope for the best here, and it did a great job. So really nice. It looks very natural. And then from here, I can duplicate this layer, Command J, and what I'm going to do here is just some cleanup. So I'm going to just label this cleanup. And what I see first is it did get this a little dark. So I'm going to go back to the clone tool, make the brush a little bit smaller. I'm just going to come nearby. And then I'm just going to carry this green over so it's not so dark. And then if you just kind of select and move it around, maybe come over this way. Yeah, and just kind of bring that around. And if this area's got a little darkness as well, I think what I want to do is add some of this. So I just click the box there and I'm going to take the opacity down. So I want to take the opacity to about 30%. I'm just going to clean up. Now you can see I caught the butterfly there. So you have to watch where your X is as you are kind of moving around with the clone tool. And you can also get, I'm just all over the place with it. So I'm going to go back and start over here and just kind of watch where that X is as I go. And as I get low, I'm going to have to come back and retarget and then come back around. And I got some lines in there, so I'm going to come back and just continue to kind of go over it and clean that up. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do with cleanup is I'm going to go to the heal tool. I made a little mistake right there. I think there's a little line right there, so I'm just going to clean up where I cloned. And I also don't like this little leaf. Just kind of go over it a couple times. We may have to use the clone tool there. And then I don't like this little leaf coming out here. Again, I'm getting this image ready if I was going to submit it to a gallery or a competition or to print. So I just want to clean up some of those straggler things. I'm going to come back in here. This is where you do need to get really close. So I'm going to grab the clone tool again. The clone tool is one of the best ways to smooth out, especially images like this in nature. Just going to keep going over that with the clone and really, there we go, kind of smooth that out so it's not looking like a blemish on my image. And this line also, so I'm going to click the target again and continue to just clone over there. Oh, my opacity is at 36%. So take that back up. Let's go back up to about 74. And again, when you get too close, just have to be careful with that. Click the target. I'm just going to come in here just a little bit. There we go. And I may come in target right here and just kind of go up with it a little bit. All right. So I think those things really helped soften the background just a little bit. Another thing that I'm going to do is I could be finished at this point. I'm pretty happy with the features that we were able to do, extending the canvas, cleaning up that white spot. But there's some additional options that I could do to this image. Typically what I'll do is I'll save it out this way. It's kind of set. And then I may do some additional creative. So I'm going to just label this some creative editing in case I don't want to use it. I often will save an image in multiple ways so that I have two versions. So what I'm going to do again is go to select, and I want to select subject because it did a pretty nice job of selecting the butterfly. It also selected the flower and it did a good job. So I'm going to keep that selection. And now what I'm going to do again is select, and I want to inverse it so that it's selecting everything outside the butterfly and the flower. Now I'm going to go to filter. I'm going to do blur, and I'm going to add a Gaussian blur. I want it to be just really, really light, really soft, just to soften this background. So I'm going to click OK and come in with that. And now I can go ahead and do Command D to get rid of that selection. And let me show you before and after. It's very, very subtle. You can really only notice it maybe on the leaves a little bit. So I can also go back in my steps. Let's go back to the select inverse, and I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And this time I'm going to do a little bit more, get that background a little bit softer. I don't want it to look unnatural, so you have to kind of balance that. And it is getting the antennas, so I am going to make sure I mask those out. So let's take it down to about 15 or 20. Click OK. Now I can do Command D. And now what I want to do is add a mask and grab black paint. Black is going to reveal what's underneath, and underneath is our layer, or our layer here that has the full image. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my brush pretty large, opacity about 50% to start with. I'm just going to bring out the details in those antennas, and I'm going to go over my subject. I just want to make sure. And then I'm going to go over this leaf a little bit, bring out a little bit more detail. But again, the story of this image is the butterfly and the flower. So I do like how Gaussian blur really softened this area. Now, another technique that you could do, if I wanted to turn this off, let me go back and duplicate the layer again. I'm going to call this Creative Edit 2. I could go to Filter and I could do a blur, Gaussian blur, and I could do it to the entire image. Click OK. And now what I could do is a mask, and I can invert it. So Command I, it takes it off. So now we've got our basic image again. And what I can do is grab a white paint and white on my brush. Again, keep my opacity maybe about 70%. And I could add that blur outside my image, and I can just add it where I want it. So that's another way to add a little blur and softness to your background. I use both techniques, and sometimes one works better than another. I'm going to raise the opacity and really soften this corner of the image. This already had such soft light, so I'm just going to go around. This helps me avoid the subject as well because I am using the brush, and I can also customize how much blur I want and where. So that's another option. So you can see now the before and the after. These are really subtle changes, but just add a little bit more detail to your image. All right, I think for this image, I am finished. The other creative tools I could do would be to add maybe some oil paint. I could also do some color adjustments. So one thing sometimes I like to do is go to selective color. And for this, we've got a little blue in the butterfly. And so I can take selective color blue and go to the cyan, and I can really increase that blue just a little bit, make that pop. Can also go to the yellows, and yellow, you can see I can make that yellow pop just a little bit. Again, I don't want to make it look unnatural, but I can just pop it just a tiny bit. And I really think for this image, the greens look fine. We've just got this beautiful color, and so I'm pretty happy with it at this point. Now, if you like to add textures to your image, this would be the point where I would go in and maybe add a texture. If you wanted to do that, you could. And otherwise, I would save this image, take it back into Lightroom, and this would be my final image that I would save into my favorites file. So I hope you enjoyed walking through this process with me of how I kind of make those final tweaks and adjustments.